I wanted to make something that reflected the continual shift of information and movement and ideas that I was witnessing. I knew I definitely wanted something that had a sort of dynamism to it. Part of the brief is to travel as far and wide as possible, and so I really wanted to go to the more contested areas and just see what ordinary people were thinking, given that they were watching these debates on TV, reading the newspapers, getting all their different information through social media, and just how they were feeling about the campaign. I really wanted to get a litmus test on that. It was the cold and wet months of November, December 2019, which is really unusual for an election, which are obviously usually in May. And so it was hard moving around on public transport, being out in all weathers and realising that that's what the campaign trail was. So every city or town I went to, there would be a market, some kind of Christmas market, often a German Christmas market, and a carousel or a big wheel or something in the centre of town. I was always looking at clocks and timetables and thinking about cycles. This notion of cycles kept coming in, and also thinking about the electoral cycle and the different sort of wheels in motion. So that all these images were slowly filtering through, as well as having access to Parliament and walking around the building. And there was one particular, in Central Lobby, there's a big chandelier, which is called a corona chandelier, like a big crown. And it's such an important piece in such a sort of important area of the building that, again, that was also feeding in, and the wheel across the river from Portcullis House. So I kept seeing wheels and cycles. An idea started forming about wanting to use a wheel or a roundabout or a carousel, and I was looking at where carousels came from. The root of the word is small battle, and it was they were used in jousting. I realised I wanted to make a piece of work that moved as the whole campaign started shifting and people's ideas and information started sort of conflicting. I thought about making something that would hang in a space and literally shift and spin and become visible and invisible. Then came up with this idea of a hanging sort of chandelier mobile, where everything is visible. There's nothing hidden in a mobile, it's all there. But there's a continual change. And I wanted to populate this mobile with figures. It just needed to be about people, it needed to be about the electorate. And I was making these little jumping jack figures, trying to think about how I could represent people. Another thing that had struck me was that the people literally were showing their colours. They were putting posters in their windows, wearing badges, putting all sorts of signage up, showing which party they were affiliated with. And I remembered childhood cartoons when politicians would wear rosettes and kiss babies and go shake hands on doorsteps. And so I started looking at all these different ways that you can signify your team, your brand or whatever. And then was making these are balsa wood kind of early versions of what the figures could be. So I started devising heads circles are obviously heads, and then the triangles became bodies. And very simply, that's a male body, and a female body would be that way around, but with the head on top. And then everything in between is the mix of the figures that will inhabit the whole mobile. I wanted a lightness of touch. I wanted it to not be anything remotely lumpen. I wanted it to be something that did all those things of moving, shifting, became visible, invisible. You can see that these, they can be very visible, or they can, from their side on, they virtually disappear. And so I started thinking about what material they'd be made of, and was looking at perspex because it's reflective, it's shiny, and it can be opaque or it can be transparent. Given the space and the scale of the space, I had to devise my sort of roundabout, if you like, in such a way that there's a structure, and then there are 8 structures off the structure, and each one of those has 8 figures. So there are 64 figures, which is the number of squares on a chessboard by chance. So there'll be hundreds of individual pieces of coloured perspex, like about 250, something like that. I've ordered the perspex, as you can see, it's all here, and I'm going to assemble the figures. And there's a fabricator who'll be actually making the armature, I guess, the structure in which of the mobile in which the figures hang. So once I've assembled 64 of these, I'll take them over to James, the fabricator, and in his workshop, we'll construct the mobile together and then install together in Portcullis House.
So this is a prototype we'd made of one of the 8 outer wheels of the sculpture. So these will hang from the main armature, and each part individually spins because it's mounted on a bearing. This is a stainless steel welded structure. The final finish will be a brush finish to match the fittings of the architecture of the space. And from each one of these spokes, we have one of the figures of the artwork, which hangs from the end, and these can also individually spin. This has to be made very accurately. It all has to be mounted on very low friction bearings, so that hopefully when you get the slightest gust of wind or air movement due to people walking around the space, we'll get that movement in the sculpture. When I first speak to an artist about a project like this, the initial conversation is really just to get the overall idea of what the artist wants to achieve. So with this project, for instance, the movement of the sculpture is very important, and then my job is obviously to make something that's physically possible, as close as possible to the artist's concept. I'm really looking forward to seeing this artwork complete and installed in Portcullis House. It's a really interesting installation in that sense, because not only has it got a lot of contrast within the sculpture, the contrast between the sculpture and the space is also really fascinating because of all the colours you see within the figures of the sculpture itself. How people are going to perceive that and react to it is going to be very interesting to see.
I'm really pleased with how everything's gone today here in the workshop. Seeing the structure, James has made this beautiful structure, which is exactly like the pencil drawing that I made a long time ago. And so, connecting the figures to that and seeing the movement, I can't wait to get it into Portcullis House now and see how it behaves in there.